Hey everybody, it's Nathan Selove, and this video has been a long time coming. It has been a very difficult and stressful, but also changing and revolutionary last few weeks. As many of you know, I have graduated. I have moved back to Virginia. Last week I didn't do a video because I was still in the process of, I had to go back to Iowa and get more stuff and bring it back to Virginia. But I'm done traveling for now. I'm back in Virginia and I have had time to process what happened to Sylvia, and I am ready to open up about her. So this video is me discussing what happened with Sylvia, but before I get into that, I want to make the main point of this video be to celebrate her life. So I'd like to discuss the overall story. Now, some of you have heard bits and pieces of this story in other videos, but it was never really as much about a celebration of her and her life and all the things she did for me as much as it was trying to give context to my life story. So just so you know, this video it's going to be sad. It's probably going to be long. If you would prefer not to watch this video, then I don't think that's unreasonable, because most of the content that I try to put out in this channel is more positive and upbeat and funny. And that's not as much going to be this video. This video is going to be more about discussing the dog that changed my life. So, as many people might already know, based on other videos, I was 9 years old when I was first diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which is now, in the DSM, it's labeled under the blanket of autism spectrum disorder. And what was interesting is, for a while, I did not know what was different about me. Like, for a very long time, I always felt out of place. I always felt like people didn't understand me, and there was some kind of barrier between myself and the other students. And when I was 10 years old, my mother explained to me that the reason why I felt different, why I was different, was because I had Asperger's or autism. And that was my first exposure to that word, to autism and Asperger's. And that was 5th grade. And at that point, things were still really bad in school. I was getting bullied a lot. I know that lots of autistics have probably been bullied in school. That is a very unfortunate thing that happens. And I was dealing with that a lot. I didn't have very many friends. I didn't really enjoy going to school. I didn't really enjoy being at school. And it got worse when it got to middle school. For one thing, as I talked about in previous videos, my middle school principal was not a good principal, to put it lightly. He did not do much to address the bullying problem. And in fact, he usually punished the victims of bullying more than he actually punished the perpetrators of it. So things just got worse and worse. And eventually my therapist suggested to my parents the idea of a service dog. You see, when I was younger, I used to have night terrors a lot. For those of you that don't know what that is, that's basically when you, wake up, you're half asleep, but you're terrified, you're screaming, you're crying, sometimes it's like you're having a nightmare that's happening inside your head, but you're awake. I can't exactly explain everything about it or the science behind it, but it's brought upon in many ways by anxiety. And there was at one point in my childhood, I was having it week, or I was having it night after night after night. And then one day our dog came and slept in my bed. And I didn't have one that night. And then he came the next night. And I didn't have a night terror that night either. And so we just kind of started having that dog sleep in the bed with me. And we realized that there was some kind of, there was something that having the dog in bed was able to do in order to basically help with my sensory problems in bed. So I always had a special connection to dogs. So when my therapist first suggested the possibility of us getting a service dog, I was ecstatic about it. I thought that would be great. My parents thought it was an interesting idea. So we started looking around for service dog agencies, and we did a lot of research, and we found one called Susquehanna Service Dogs. It's in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And, we contacted them, we got on the waiting list, and eventually they brought us in for some meetings in which they would watch me interact with demo dogs, and to kind of get a feel for what I was like, what I would be like. At this point, I believe I was about 10 years old. Yeah, I was 10 years old at this point. And where was I? 11? I was 10 or 11. They watched my interactions with the dogs, and eventually, in 6th grade, when I was 11, they started bringing me in to these what are called Meet the Dog sessions, where I would come in and they would introduce me to dogs that were almost done with their training, or at least their preliminary training, to try to see if they could match me up with a dog. On the first one, I met some great dogs, but they didn't really find one that was a great match. And then on the second one, they brought out a few dogs and I really liked them. And then they brought out this other dog, a yellow lab. And as soon as they let her, they let her come to me, as soon as they brought her in, she ran up to me, she jumped on my lap, and she started licking my face. And I knew already that I liked this dog. And they watched me interact with her. And I was very well bonded with her. I was very close to her. And when she would get on my lap, I just felt this relief. It was the deep pressure helped with the sensory, and suddenly I was able to just block everything else out, and I was able to actually focus. And it went so well that after they had already brought all the other dogs out, I asked if they could bring her back out. And so I interacted with her a bit more, and I knew that this was the dog that I wanted, and that was Sylvia. So a little bit later, they contacted us and told us that there was a match, and they told us that I had been matched with Sylvia. And I was so happy. I was so excited. And it felt so good to know that there was some kind of brightness at the end of the tunnel. And I actually had to take off my last week of 6th grade. And I believe I've told this story before, but this helps to put into perspective just how much I was disliked by my fellow classmates, and how much I was an outcast to them. When I told a class that I wasn't going to be there for the last week of class, they cheered, because I wasn't going to be there. And that hurt a lot. But at least it was to be with Sylvia, so that was okay. So I went through the training process and I learned a lot about how to handle Sylvia, how to interact with Sylvia. And it was actually at this point that, and I've told this story before, but I'll go ahead and give a short version. It was at this point that I realized how my emotions, how the way I acted affected people around me, because I was able to see that when I was really stressed, when I was really frustrated, it would affect Sylvia. It would make it harder for Sylvia to understand what I needed from her. So in seeing that, I was able to adjust the way that I acted, and that was a major breakthrough for me. So at the end of the program, the agency that I got her from has this public access test that they had everyone take. And, you know, for a little bit, because I was 11, almost 12 at the time, they were concerned that prior to the training program, they were concerned that they might not actually be able to assign me individually to the dog, because sometimes what happens when it's kids is they assign a third party handler. So they weren't completely sure that I would be able to handle her by myself, but I was very motivated to show them that I could do that. And throughout the entire process, I demonstrated to them that I could, and it was because of how much Sylvia helped me. And at the end of it, when we took the public access test, we passed it with flying colors. And she was my partner. And I took her everywhere with me. Like 2 days after we got back, we took a trip to Disney World, a place with loud noises, fumes, crowds, places, things that would give me meltdowns all the time. And I didn't have a single meltdown the entire trip because Sylvia was with me. And then when I started school, it just felt so much easier. It felt so much better. I started getting really good grades. At one point, there was this parent-teacher conference where my math teacher was talking to my parents, and she was saying that, oh yeah, Nathan, he is so focused, and he is attentive, and he's never drifting all over the place, and he's always on task. And my parents' response was basically, wait, Nathan Selove? Our son? He's always on task? Like that was crazy to them, that there would be that much of a change, but there was. It was almost overnight. And suddenly there were people that wanted to connect with me, that wanted to talk to me, because they saw the service dog and they asked me about her. And I explained to them why I had her. And they realized that the weird behavior that I had, it wasn't because I was trying to annoy them. It was just because I had a disability that affected how I acted. And, you know, it didn't solve all of the bullying problems, but it brought a lot more people over to my side, or at least it brought more people, it caused more people to want to actually understand me, to want to get to know me. And I started making more friends, and I actually started to enjoy school. Now there are some legal problems with the school that I'd rather not get into, but we were able to figure that all out. And then and she got me through middle school, and then in high school I did forensics competition. I was an autistic who competed in competitive public speaking, and I did a really good job in it. I was very competitively successful, and I even finaled at nationals my senior year. And that was because of Sylvia. I was able to travel all around the country because I had that service dog with me, who was able to keep my sensory levels in check, apply deep pressure therapy when needed, be a physical barrier when needed, and it made it possible. And then at the end of high school, I decided that I wanted to go to a 4-year school, and I applied to James Madison University, and I got in, and I continued forensics competition there, And again, I traveled all around the country. I was able to get my bachelor's degree in communication studies as an autistic. And she was with me every step of the way. And when I would do forensics competition, I would always bring her up with me. Like when there were award ceremonies, I would always take her up with me, because any competitive success that I had, she was directly involved in. She deserved just as much credit. And, throughout the years, I experienced personal tragedies that she was with me for, heartbreak that she was with me for, stress from assignments that, again, she was with me for. And it felt like she was a part of me. And then at the end of college, I felt like I felt like I wanted to go further. And so I applied to several schools, and I ended up getting accepted into all three of them, which was amazing. And again, it wasn't, it was because I had this amazing companion helping me along the way. And I decided to go to Northern Iowa. And the thing is, when I was a kid, because of the autism, I didn't think that I would ever be out of my parents' house. I didn't think that I would ever be able to go to a 4-year school. I thought that I'd have to stop at community college, one of our local community colleges, and just that would be the extent of it. And not only did I go away to a 4-year school, I went to to another part of the country for graduate school for 2 years. And none of that would have been possible without Sylvia. And then towards the end of the first year of graduate school, at this point she was 12 years old, it was clear that she was slowing down, and it was becoming more and more clear that she needed to retire. So I made the really difficult decision to apply for a successor dog. And at the first Meet the Dogs, that's when we met Blake, and we decided on her. And one of the last things that Sylvia did with me was she stood next to me at my wedding, because I got married, had a 1-week honeymoon, and then went straight from that to the team training with Blake. And Sylvia was right up there with me when I got married. And when I left for team training, I had to leave Sylvia at this house, and it was the longest I had ever been away from her. I had to be away from her for a week. It was the longest I'd ever been away from her. And that was one of the hardest things ever, to say goodbye to her for that week. And then after the team training, she came back to Iowa for the last year at Northern Iowa. And we had her as just a pet. She was just a pet. She was able to live out her retirement at home, and, she would be our pet. And we tried to make sure that she was comfortable, having fun, and she was old, but she was happy. And then towards the end of the second semester, and I'd like to, at this point, I'd like to go ahead and give a trigger warning. If you don't want to hear about how she passed, you should go ahead and stop the video right here. So towards the end of the last semester, she started acting a little bit different. And one night she threw up, and that's not uncommon. Dogs throw up, so we cleaned it up, and we tried to. This standard procedure that the service dog place told us about is to, if they have a stomach bug, don't feed them for a little bit. Let them kind of try to flush it out of their system, and then they should be fine. So we did that, but then she threw up again, and then she threw up several more times, and at that point we were starting to get very concerned. So we took her to the vet to try to get a diagnosis, to try to figure out what was happening. And she had to stay there. She had to stay at the vet while they figured it out. And then I was at school, and Jess was at the vet, and I got a call from her saying that Sylvia apparently had a kidney infection. And that the vet was going to try to do everything that they could. They were going to put her on put her through some treatments, and she would have to stay at the vet's office for a week, which was very difficult. But I was like, okay. So she stayed at the vet's office, and I visited her there every single day. And at the end of it, from what I can understand, I don't know a lot about physiology, but they were able to stop the infection, but it had already done too much damage, and it wasn't able to pump her creatinine levels, and her creatinine levels were still too high. And they basically told us that at that point, there wasn't really anything else they could do. And they suggested that we take her back home and try to make her as comfortable as possible. And that she probably had only a few more days. So we tried to make her as comfortable as possible. We tried to feed her foods that she really liked. Like, she always liked to eat butter. And so we would try to feed her that. And she actually made it longer than they predicted. In fact, there was my parents actually drove down on the weekend at the end of the week, and she was still with us. They were able to say goodbye to her. And the most difficult thing was telling her that I would be all right, because it felt like she was still holding on, because she felt like I still needed her. And the hardest part was telling her that it was okay, that I would be okay, that she didn't need to put herself through any more pain. And the thing is, she was my best friend for 11 years. And she was leaving me. And I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to cope with it. I tried to make sure every day I would go to bed, and I would wake up and go check on her and be scared that it was the day, and she would still be with us. And then one day, and we weren't sure if we were going to have to put her down ourselves. We figured she didn't seem to be in too much pain. But we didn't know what was going to happen. And then one day, I noticed that she was starting to sort of move her paws a bit in a sort of strange way, and I knew something was happening. And then she just passed. her body just kind of died peacefully. And it's difficult. The fact that I watched it happen is very difficult. It's something that is going to be hard for me to that has been hard for me to cope with. But at the same time, I'm really glad that I was with her. I'm really glad that the last thing she felt was my hand petting her and my voice telling her that I loved her. Sorry. And I was trying to tell her she was the greatest friend that a guy could ask for. And it was so good that it was peaceful. It was surrounded by people she loved, by Jess and by me. And it was probably the best way it could have happened. And she was 13 years old, which for a lab, that's pretty old. She had a pretty long life. She had a pretty fulfilling life. And I'm just so glad that we were able to give that to her. And ever since that happened, I've been missing her so much. I've been thinking about her a lot. And it was really difficult to go straight from that to then having to finish the semester as strong as I could. After the semester was over, we brought her back to Virginia and gave her a proper burial. And the thing that I want to make sure that you all know, that people think about, is that every single person that has been helped by this channel has been helped by her. That is her legacy. Her legacy has been being a model. Like this channel, when it started being focused on autism advocacy, it wasn't about me as much as it was how much she helped me, how much she was able to get me to accept who I was as an autistic, to accept who I am. And every single time I talk about embracing the social model, embracing who you are, loving the fact that you're autistic, she was the one that taught me to do that. She was the one that taught me to love myself. And that is her legacy. This channel is her legacy. And for those of you that are newcomers to the channel, new subscribers that don't know too much about Sylvia and all the things she did, you should go back and watch some of the older videos. For those of you that have been here for a while, you know how much she's done. And I frequently get people messaging me, asking me about service dogs, about the process of service dogs and how a service dog helped me. And every time I answer those questions, every time this channel is able to help people towards potentially making the decision to get a service dog, that is her legacy living on. So I know that this has been a very long video, and I apologize for that. And if you stayed with me throughout this whole thing, then I appreciate that. But what I want everyone to do is just remember her, remember Sylvia, because she has done so much, and she changed my life. and she changed a lot of other people's lives along the way. And I believe that the way that we live on, the way that we actually become, I guess, immortal, is by those that we left behind remembering us, remembering what we did. And I would ask that people remember her and understand how important she was. So, next week we're going to get back to our regular videos that are going to be more upbeat and fun, but I needed to make this video, and I don't know how many people watched the whole thing, and if you did, I appreciate that. But thank you for all the support that everyone has shown me on this channel. I haven't been answering comments as much recently as I normally do, and I apologize for that, but it's been because I've been dealing with a lot and I haven't been keeping up with that, and I haven't been very good about updating YouTube. So I will hopefully try to get better about that, but this summer, expect more regular posts, expect more fun posts. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And don't forget about Sylvia.